Well, I look a lot more like my profile picture now. Welcome to my channel, Zulzy Draws, where I draw because I feel like it. Today I feel like honoring Black historical figures. It's February, and February is Black History Month. And what does a little white boy like me know about Black history? Not enough. Never enough. So I decided to educate myself by reaching out to some of you guys. I made this poll on my Instagram story asking which Black political figures you would like to see drawn in my Jordan style. Thank you so much to those of you that answered the poll. I had a lot of good answers, but I chose specifically 3 that really called out to me, and I did a little research on them. It's important that we have a Black History Month because I don't think we're fully aware of just how much white history we learn about, and it gets imprinted into our minds from a young age. I want this video to put a well-deserved spotlight on Black history and Black excellence. I feel deprived. I want to fix that. That's gonna mean I'm gonna have to go out of my way to look for that information that I didn't have before. I encourage you guys to do the same, and I'm going to start right now by drawing these historical figures and reading a little bit about them from some of the research I did. Now keep in mind, just because it's February, or I guess it's the end of February now, we should try our best to educate ourselves about people outside of our culture all year round. So I actually encourage you, whether you're watching this in February of 2021 or December of 2023, we can always benefit from learning something new about a culture outside of our own. I hope you enjoy, I hope you celebrate how these people have shaped us in our history and all the way up till today. Without further ado, let's get started. So the first character that you see being drawn behind me is Marsha P Johnson. Marcia Pay It No Mind Johnson. I'm going to read an article straight from glsen.org. Their mission is to ensure that every member of every school community is valued and respected regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. So this article comes straight from them. Marcia Pay It No Mind Johnson, 1945 to 1992, was a Black trans woman who was a force behind the Stonewall riots and surrounding activism that sparked a new phase of the LGBTQ plus movement in 1969. Along with Sylvia Rivera, she established the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, or STAR, in 1970, a group committed to supporting transgender youth experiencing homelessness in New York City. Marcia P. Johnson was tragically murdered on July 6, 1992, at the age of 46. Her case was originally closed by the NYPD as an alleged suicide, but transgender activist Mariah Lopez fought for it to be reopened for investigation in 2012. Marcia P. Johnson is now one of the most venerated? I don't know, look up that word. You always gotta keep learning. Venerate. Regarded with respect or revered. Thank you, Google. Zulzy's tip of the day. If you don't know the word, look it up. She is now one of the most venerated icons in LGBTQ plus history. She has been celebrated in a series of books, documentaries, and films. Her actions and words continue to inspire trans activism and resistance, and will continue to do so well into the future. That article, as good as it was, short, sweet, to the point, I wanted to know a little bit more. It was actually really easy to find this information. Just by typing in her name, I scrolled through a few articles and I wanted to look for some reputable sources. This one is ucnj.org, and it's literally a Marcia P. Johnson memorial page. Let's read what that says. The fifth of 7 children, Marcia was born to Malcolm Michaels Sr. and Alberta Claiborne Michaels on August 24th, 1945. In Elizabeth, New Jersey. So that explains why it's ucnj.org, because this is New Jersey. Marcia was educated in the Elizabeth public school system and graduated from Thomas A. Edison High School in 1963. After graduating high school, she enrolled in the United States Navy for a brief stint. Marcia relocated to New York's Greenwich Village to discover herself. Marcia found joy as a self-made drag queen of Christopher Street, infamous for her unique design and costume creation. Throughout her discovery phase, she was referred to as Malcolm and Black Marcia before settling on Marcia P. Johnson. The P stands for Pay It No Mind. Johnson quickly became a prominent fixture in the LGBTQ community, serving as a drag mother, helping homeless and struggling LGBTQ youth. Marcia was extremely successful and toured the world as a successful drag queen with the hot peaches. And this is a quote from her. I was no one, nobody from Nowheresville until I became a drag queen. That's what made me in New York. That's what made me in New Jersey. That's what made me in the world. Although Marcia struggled with mental illness, she had a profound way of putting others' needs before her own. Johnson remained in constant communication with her family and often returned home to Elizabeth, New Jersey, in observance of the holidays. During her commute home, Marcia would invite wayward people to join her there for a hot meal with her family. Marcia never visited home empty-handed. She would bring her nieces and her nephews trinkets and flowers for her mother. Aww. Contrary to the belief, the family was very dear to Marcia's heart. Her forthright nature and enduring strength led her to speak out against injustices. June 28, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street, things turned violent after the members of LGBTQ community were harassed by the NYPD 6th Precinct. Many eyewitnesses have identified Marcia as one of the main instigators of the uprising, and thus some have recognized her as the vanguard of the gay liberation movement in the United States. So vanguard is another word I want to look up real quick. The forefront of an action or a movement. That checks out. Marcia is honored as a Stonewall pioneer, a drag queen, and an Andy Warhol model, an actress, and a revolutionary trans activist. If you want to read any of what I just read on your own terms, I'm going to be putting links in my bio today. But again, I encourage you to go pick up a book at the library. Do some online surfing of your own. A fun fact about this drawing that I'm doing is it's the only one that I'll be doing in color. That's because she is one of the later characters in history that I was learning about in the past couple of days. And like this article said, this was only like the 1960s and 70s. One of the reasons I decided to pick this picture of Marcia to draw was because I just felt it was so fitting. This is the only one in color, and boy did I pick a lot of colors. It looks like Marcia loved to deck herself out in lots of decor, loud florals, loud colors. She wanted to be seen, and be seen she did. When I was telling my friends about this idea for a video, more than one immediately jumped to Marcia P Johnson for me to talk about. So thank you specifically for mentioning her name. Obviously she's very important if friends from separate groups are telling me about her and how important she is to them. That's Marcia P Johnson. This lovely gal that we're talking about today is Josephine Baker. The information I'm reading now comes directly from womenshistory.org. Josephine Baker, from 1906 to 1975, so we're going a little bit further back. World-renowned performer, World War II spy, and activist are few of the titles used to describe Josephine Baker. One of the most successful African-American performers in French history, Baker's career illustrates the ways entertainers can use their platforms to change the world. Oh, I don't know why that just gave me goosebumps. On June 3rd, 1906, Frida Josephine Mcdonald was born in St. Louis, Missouri. Her parents, both entertainers, performed throughout the segregated Midwest, often bringing her on stage during their shows. If she was unable to find work, she would often dance on the streets, collecting money from onlookers. Eventually, her routine caught the attention of an African-American theater troupe. Troupe? Gotta do this again. Troupe. At the age of 15, Baker ran off and began to perform with the group. She also married during this time, taking her husband's last name and dropping her first name, becoming Josephine Baker. Baker flourished as a dancer in several vaudeville shows. She eventually moved to New York City and participated in the celebration of Black life and art, now known as the Harlem Renaissance. A few years later, her success took her to Paris. Baker became one of the most sought-after performers due to her distinct dancing style and unique costumes. Although her audiences were mostly white, Baker's performance followed African themes and styles. In her famed show, Danse, I don't speak French.
Danse sauvage.
That. She danced across stage in a banana skirt. Known for her dancing and singing, she even played in several successful major motion pictures released in Europe. When Adolf Hitler and the German army invaded France during World War II, Baker joined the fight against the Nazi regime. She aided French military officials by passing on secrets she heard while performing in front of the enemy. That's where I knew I needed to pick her. Like, not only is she this talented performer, she's like, She transported the confidential information by writing it with invisible ink on music sheets. After many years of performing in Paris, Baker returned to the United States. Her return home forced Baker to confront segregation and discrimination that she had not experienced since she was a child in St. Louis. She often refused to perform in segregated audiences, which usually forced club owners to integrate for her shows. Her opposition against segregation and discrimination was recognized by the NAACP. In 1963, she was one of the few women allowed to speak at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. She said this, "You know, friends, that I do not lie to you when I tell you I have walked into the palaces of kings and queens and into the houses of the presidents, and so much more. But I could not walk into a hotel in America and get a cup of coffee, and that made me mad." I got goosebumps again. Josephine Baker continued to fight racial injustices even after that, into the 1970s, but let's just recap because that was a lot. She made it big as a performer, as a black woman, in segregated times, and she aided in the war against Nazis. Once again, thank you so much to those of you that suggested these characters. This was a good one. So the third person I'm talking about today is Claudette Colvin. I'm taking this information also from womenshistory.org. And once again, I'm going to put links in the description of this. This is titled The Girl Who Acted Before Rosa Parks. Every American child learns about Rosa Parks in school. Her arrest led to the boycott of the city's public transportation that lasted 381 days and ignited the civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. 9 months earlier, Claudette Colvin was arrested for the exact same thing, and she was just 15 years old. Colvin grew up in a poor black neighborhood in Montgomery, Alabama. She picked up quickly that black people had to be on their best behavior while out in public because of Jim Crow. She learned about inequalities black people in the South face on a regular basis. She attended an all-black school, as Alabama did not actually desegregate its schools until the later years of 1954. Her instructors took the time to teach their students about Jim Crow and about black history, especially during February. February was the month that was celebrated around the country, but Colvin School celebrated black history for the entire month because her teachers felt black people were absent from history books. After school on March 2nd, 1955, Claudette Colvin walked to downtown Montgomery with 3 of her classmates. She and her friends were going to take the city bus home from school that day. When they boarded the bus, they sat behind the first 5 rows, which were reserved for white passengers. A young white woman boarded the bus after Colvin and her friends and found nowhere to sit because the white section was full. Bus drivers had the authority to make black passengers move for white passengers, even if they were sitting in the black section. The bus driver asked Colvin and her friends to get up, which her friends immediately did. She refused to move. On her mind were the lessons that she had learned throughout her life, especially during Negro History Month at her school just days before. Though her friends' seats, one next to Colvin and 2 across the aisle, were now vacant, the white woman refused to sit in them because, according to the Jim Crow laws, black people could not sit next to white people. They had to sit behind white people to show their inferiority. When asked again, Colvin refused to give up. Bus driver alerted the traffic police, and 3 stops later, a traffic officer came onto the bus and asked her why she was sitting there and why she wasn't going to get up. She replied, "Because it's my constitutional right." The traffic officer told the bus driver that the police needed to get involved. A stop or 2 later, 2 police officers came onto the bus and instructed Colvin to get up. She refused. She later said, "I could not move because history had made me glued to the seat." The police officers each grabbed one of her arms, kicked her, threw books from her lap, and manhandled her off of the bus. It's hard to read that next part. On the way to jail, the police officers called her racist and sexist names, and when they got to jail, other officers took part in the name calling. They booked her as an adult and locked her in a cell without permitting her to make a phone call. She had no idea if anyone who could help her would find out where she was. The classmates that were on the bus with her called her mother and her minister. However, her minister paid her bail and she was released. Colvin, her family, and her neighbors were all afraid of retaliation from a white supremacist group, and they stayed up all night keeping watch. Luckily, they never came. Afterwards, she found out that many parents told her classmates to stay away from her because she was crazy. As a result of the stand she took, she was made fun of by other teenagers. I'm going to read a little bit more from NPR.org. This article had a lot of quotes from Claudette Colvin herself. When asked why she thinks she's little known and why everyone thinks only of Rosa Parks, Colvin says that the NAACP and all the other black organizations felt Parks would be a good icon because she was an adult and they didn't think teenagers would be reliable. She also says that Parks had the right hair and the right look. Her skin texture was the kind that people associate with the middle class. It's a little bit sad to think one of the reasons she's been overshadowed is because she was a lot younger, she was a lot darker. I even saw an article that said because she didn't have the right hair. And also, Miss Claudette Colvin ended up getting pregnant very shortly after. And unfortunately, people just didn't take this kind of girl seriously. And unfortunately, I think that's something that we are guilty of today. So I ask you, why do we study history when it's uncomfortable? Because there are lessons to be learned, and because we need to compare if anything that makes us uncomfortable about then is still happening today, because chances are, probably in a lot of ways. I want to end this one on a high note. On the ride home from jail, Reverend Johnson had said something to me that I'll never forget. He was an adult who everyone respected, and his opinion meant a lot to me. Claudette, he said, I'm so proud of you. Everyone pays for freedom. We've all been praying and praying. But you're different. You want your answer the next morning, and you just brought the revolution to Montgomery. Thank you, Marsha P Johnson. Thank you, Claudette Colvin. Thank you, Josephine Baker. And several others that I hope I can learn about in the near future. At the end of the day, my goal with my art and the sharing of my art through this YouTube channel is to spread love, and I want as many people as possible to take a look at something I've created and see a piece of themselves in it. I cannot successfully do that unless I do extensive research on people who are not similar to me. Let's celebrate our differences, and let's celebrate the successes of those that are not in our groups. I hope a video like this also inspires you to start more conversations with one another. I encourage you to write in the comments about someone in Black history that made an impact on your life. I also encourage you to go and read those comments and do some research on every comment that you see listed there. I'll see you guys in the next Zulzy Draws video, and until then, let's keep making history together, and let's continue to amplify Black voices. And if that's all, we're golden. Thanks guys, bye. Take it upon yourselves to get that
You want.
I can't speak. That's not new.